Hello, everybody. Welcome back to YHS. We are so excited to kick off our first panel discussion of the day, the power of glocal. Hoteliers today find ourselves in a vortex of change. Increasing consumer consciousness about pollution and global warming is leading people to take more sporadic trips, but less often, leading to fewer miles traveled overall. There's an overnight shift of consumer demand going on right now. Terms like staycation, work from hotel packages, and haycations are entering the travel lexicon. These are words that didn't even exist a couple years ago. How will the hospitality industry supply keep up with the evolving priorities of consumers? And more importantly, how will consumers and companies come together to accelerate travel to new horizons? Here with insights, we are delighted to welcome our expert panel of the day. Panelists, are you with us?
Yes, we are. Thank you.
Hello. How are you doing today? All right.
Super.
Perfect. So we're going to start off with a few introductions of our lovely panelists. So unfortunately, Mr. Tony Chisholm will not be joining us today, but that still leaves us with a wonderful panel of four. Beginning with Mr. Ted Teng. Can you give us a wave? Mr. Ted Teng is the former president and CEO of the Leading Hotels of the World, which is a collection of authentic and uncommon luxury hotels that are curated for the curious traveler. Before joining Leading Hotels of the World, Mr. Ted Teng led the growth of many renowned luxury hospitality brands, such as Wyndham International and Starwood Hotels and Resorts.
Up next, we have Miss Serena Guen. If you could give us a little wave. Hello, hi. She is the founder of the Suitcase magazine, and in her third year at NYU, she was founded the award-winning magazine. She's the co-founder of Cook for Syria, which helped raises awareness for the crisis that is happening there. She was recognized in Forbes for 30 Under 30 back in 2017. And after that, we have Mr. Eugenio Pirri. Hello, hi.
Hello.
He was the Chief of People and Culture Officer at the Dorchester Collection. When he was 16 years old, he was promoted to being the restaurant manager and has kept climbing the ladder since. He always likes to put people first, and he is the Chief of People and Culture. He was back in 2017, where he directs all aspects of the human resources, including the learning and development.
All right, thank you. And last but not least, the moderator of this panel is Ms. Juliet Kinsman, Sustainability Editor at the Condé Nast Traveler. Through this role and through founding her own company, Boutico, she has made enormous strides in creating luxury travel to become a force for societal good. And not only does this better society, as we will see in today's panel, it's actually more and more aligned with what consumers really want from hotel brands. So with that, it is an honor to hand the floor over to you.
Thank you so much. Wow, what an introduction. That's very exciting. Thanks. We are certainly excited to be talking about globalism, which is obviously thinking global, acting local, and so much to talk about. So I'll start with Serena. Serena, obviously, you have a magazine and a media company that tells stories from all over the world, and there has been a paradigm shift in the last year. How are you thinking about travel in terms of? Are you trying to sort of emphasize more conscious travel, more sustainable travel? And what do those terms mean to you?
A lot of questions. First of all, I want to say I love the setup of this panel. It's absolutely amazing. So well done at YHS. So I think COVID has made a lot of people reprioritize their lives, and it's led to newfound appreciation for like the things that they do have, including their planet. For me in London, even like the reduced traffic in cities in the city this year has meant so much less pollution, and I could walk along the river and like I could really feel the impact that just staying at home and not like consuming as much really had. So I think people are realizing the impact, the little things that they can do to have a big impact, and that they do have an impact. The things that we're doing, I mean, it's such a big problem. It's easy to feel paralyzed, but we're just taking little steps. So we're doing three main things. First is highlighting as many hotels and experiences as possible that positively impact the environment or local communities. We're encouraging staycations. Our audience is global, so that's a little harder sometimes, but just encouraging people to explore like their local neighborhoods and just like what's outside of just the places that they're living. And I really think that's one of the best trends to come out of COVID. I hope it sticks around. And then the third is encouraging localized travel. So focusing on destinations that are slightly more off the beaten track. So maybe instead of going to Paris, you might choose Lyon. And also featuring as many independent shops and restaurants as possible so that people's money can go that little bit further and benefit local economies.
That's great. Thank you. I think there's a lot of talk about isms. We've already covered some, and we're talking about globalism. But I always love the term communitarianism. So how can you really highlight those heroes in different communities doing good? In terms of, so the landscape has changed, and you mentioned also steering people to less serviced areas. So I'm thinking, obviously we know the term over-tourism, but now they're calling it sort of redistributed travel. So we're deliberately sending people to the areas that have less tourism. So I'm thinking in terms of this changing landscape, Ted, where do you think in terms of hotel investors and investment, where do you think perhaps people should be looking to invest?
Thanks, Julia. Well, first of all, wonderful to be back, maybe not physically back, in person at the YHS. It's wonderful to share some thoughts with everyone. So a couple of years ago, a travel journalist asked me a fairly routine question. What's new, Ted? And I paused and thought about it and said, new is new. I know it sounds strange. What I observed at the time was that our current customers, they wanted to travel to new destinations, right? Who would have thought of going to Vietnam for a beach vacation in the 70s, right? Who would have thought of going to Croatia and visit some vineyards in the 90s? And even in Switzerland, who would have thought of Andermatt as a resort destination? Most of the male Swiss people I know remember Andermatt as their military training, and it's a godforsaken place. But hey, that's a new destination. On the other hand, while our current customers are looking for new destinations, new outbound markets are developing. Right? New travelers are coming from China, Brazil, India, and Indonesia. And most of them want to go to visit the well-established destinations of Paris, London, Rome, New York, and San Francisco. So new destinations and new source markets of customers, new is new. To me, the opportunity for investors will depend on their expertise. Is it developing new destinations? Is it acquiring customers from new outbound markets, or bringing the new and the developed together as an intermediary? Not to mention investing in technologies to support this. And what you all do, Condé Nast and Suitcase, what you all do as a travel media, you tell the stories of these new destinations and perhaps, into the new outbound markets. And that's what brings all sort of the travel together. So not a simple answer for investors, but to me, lots of opportunities to invest in travel.
I think what's interesting is also, when Serena made the point that often we might look at destinations we know, but have a new narrative around those, and we might be sort of highlighting its virtues in a way through a more conscious lens. So I think we're sort of shining a light in a new way on places we knew before. So Eugenio, tell me, in terms of, because please remind us of where all your destinations are, but how do you sort of represent that local culture and that destination as the Dorchester Collection?
Yeah, first of all, again, hello everyone. Welcome to my home, which is something I never thought I would say a year ago. So here we are today, but I wish I was in person with all of you. But yes, definitely. So we're, a very small, very high-end luxury company. We operate in some of those destinations that Ted spoke about, London, Rome, Milan, Paris, Beverly Hills, of course, London, things along those lines. So I think there's this, I think first what has to be said is that there's this belief sometimes that because you're operating in luxury, some of those maybe off the beaten path places, maybe people don't think that there is an association, but I think you'd be surprised because the one good thing about these well-traveled places is they are very multicultural and they have a lot to offer, not just in the, I go to London and I need to go to Buckingham Palace, and Paris, I need to go to the Louvre. There's so many unique, wonderful destinations in each of these cities that you can actually steer your guest in a different direction. That's then going to support local businesses, local craftsmen, local tradesmen that are really trying to do something different, maybe from an artistic point of view, maybe from a food and beverage point of view. There's so many different opportunities. And I think that's really where you really need to direct your own hotel, your own people, and sort of widen the net. I think we got so used to, and it's almost a little bit of laziness, maybe sometimes on the parts of traditional concierges and saying, this is where you need to see when you go to these destinations. But in actual fact, the breadth of opportunity and things that can be done in these locations is really endless. And I think then it really then starts to have a positive impact when it speaks to how you are trying to operate as a business, trying to be sustainable, trying to be cultural, trying to be diverse, all of those key things tie it into the areas in which you operate. Then you really are thinking locally, but actually acting on a much more global nature.
Thank you. Yes, I think obviously we all know that many words that are used in marketing and branding around, authenticity and, but you're actually showing us that rather than just telling us that. I think that's...
Contrary to popular belief, just because you're in Rome, not only the Colosseum is authentic, actually there's a lot of really amazing, authentic and much more diverse things than just that in Rome or the Vatican.
Yeah, well, and I think we know in the last year, obviously travel has changed. And I often think it makes us think about why we travel rather than just where we travel. And so obviously in the introduction, they mentioned buzzwords. Everyone loves new buzzwords. Serena, we can't help but throw these into conversations. What are your favorite terms or what's in your lexicon now that might not have been before?
Okay, so I guess I'll start with my least favorite because I hate the word pleasure. I think we need to find another word for that because it sounds so unappealing. And it's what a lot of people are doing now, especially since work has become more flexible.
So business and leisure put together.
Yeah, business and leisure blended together. I really liked a word I actually learned from YHS, and the MC mentioned it, the idea of a haycation. So when I looked into that, that means a vacation stay on a farm where you help out with some daily tasks. And it really helps you kind of get back to nature and do something just totally different, especially if you live in a city. I didn't realize I actually did that on my gap year. It used to be called woofing, or working on an organic farm. So you go and help a little bit in exchange for bed and board. And it was such an amazing experience. I really recommend that. And then the other one, it's not really a word. It's more of a concept, but upskilling sabbaticals. So I think it's really interesting to see now, especially since COVID, that a lot of people are taking sabbaticals younger and younger. So not waiting until retirement age, and they're taking a year off to learn something new that they've always wanted to do, whether that's becoming a cordon bleu chef or becoming a yoga teacher in Bali, and then they go back to work feeling really refreshed and fulfilled. And I think that's just such an amazing concept.
Yeah, that's great. It really demonstrates travel being enriching and getting much more from it. I think when we talk about trends, certainly, and innovations, we often think of technology, as Ted mentioned. So in terms of high tech, Ted, what do you think we're looking for now as consumers, but also within the industry?
Well, it's interesting. we talk about buzzwords, right? And there was a term that I think I used some time ago, co-creation, and sometimes people say, well, what is co-creation? Well, in the past, makers, producers made the products, and customers decided if they like it or not, right? And makers always try very hard to make the products that customer will like, and customers chose products they like depending on the choices available. Co-creation in business, it simply means some part of the products are designed with the customers. This takes place in many different formats. It could be focus group, customer research, choice of options, or customizable type of products. It doesn't mean that the makers can just walk away from innovation, because somebody will always say, well, the focus group would have suggested the iPhone. It just means that customers also play a role in the product development or the product use. In the hotel space, hoteliers used to build a hotel, created the service to the best of their know-how, and at one point, hoteliers actually knew better than the customers what they would like. This is no longer the case, especially in luxury. I think about how many times housekeeping found the furniture in the room or the terrace rearranged, but of course we put them all back the way they should be, right? That's a signal that your guests want to use your product differently than you have designed it. And maybe a family in a suite wants to have a meal, but they don't want to order from room service. Yep. Are our chefs ready to co-create a meal that they would like? Getting to the technology part, technology can play a big part in co-creation. What if a guest can choose their arrival amenities instead of the standard VIP package 3? Some would say, well, that's just guest history, right? No, not all guests want the exact same thing every time. They may feel like something different for this particular stay. It is contextual. It's not fixed or static. Hotel guests, they may like to co-create this experience with the hoteliers. Travelers, in my opinion, want technology that makes their lives easier, simpler, safer, more convenient. And each person may want it very differently. Ted Teng, don't want to learn how to use your sophisticated lighting system in the room. Right? This may be really nice at home where I use it all the time, but not in the hotel room for a single stay. Right? I don't need a hotel to find out what music I like and try to program a playlist on the sound system. I bring my own music, and I just want to connect easily to a set of Bluetooth speakers. Now, on my arrival, it'd be great if a hotel can text me the hotel address and telephone number, just in case I have to call or tell a taxi driver, which hotel I'm staying at.
Because that's helpful. It's not a gimmick.
No, it's not. It's very useful.
Yes.
And I do not want to download your brand or hotel app to order room service.
That's an interesting conversation in itself.
Provide technology to the guest that's intuitive for the convenience of the guests, right? Let the guests help design their own stay easily, individually, and make sure it is the word omni-channel, meaning that you can call, text, see you in person, on your app, whatever it is a consistent experience.
So I'm hearing you say that the qualities that are probably more pronounced now are flexibility, adaptability, and a bit of two-way. And I think, for me as someone who really talks about sustainability and looks at sustainability, you're talking about better relationships. So that's interesting. In terms of, and in terms of a mindset, we always talk about millennial mindsets. I think always millennials, not so much an age, it is a mindset. So Serena, in terms of that, what would you say the priorities are? I mean, it's interesting hearing Ted. Would you be downloading the app?
I don't know. I mean, I would, because there's probably no other way to order the room service or communicate with the concierge. But it's not necessarily because I want to, it's because I have to. I think the most exciting tech I've seen in hotel rooms is just when it's really well designed. Like if there are plugs next to the bed, if there's like a kind of multi-plug that I don't have to bring adapters with, just a really basic thing, getting the basics right is just really, really important. And then going back to millennials, I think millennials will, after the pandemic, I guess, and now, will be much more aware of the impact of their spending. I think there's been so many conversations about where your money goes, supporting independence, seeing the struggles of big businesses and small. So people will be wanting to make their money count and really, really keen to do what they can for the environment and local communities. But at the same time, many will also have been hit quite hard financially, especially women. And they might not be able to spend like quite as much as they'd like to. But if they were given the choice between two places, one that had eco credentials and then one that didn't, I think they would definitely want to choose the one with the eco credentials. So I think that already is quite a big shift.
And you used the word impact earlier. For me, it's about the measurable, visible impact. And I think what's really important is it's nuanced. So I do certainly proselytize about looking at ownership of hotels. And a perfect example of how actually you have to dig deeper and think more deeply. So if I were looking at a big international chain where the money goes back to the owners in a foreign land, I might on face value think, oh, that might not be for me. But I have to say, and I'm sorry, full disclosure, I did have chats with the Dorchester Collection. I have been speaking to Jenyas, and for me, then finding out about that particular group, how much they've looked after their employees during this time, that becomes something really important. So I think the mindset is really just to also think more deeply, ask more questions, and really look case by case. There's not just one rule.
No, I don't think there isn't like some property. If we're talking about hotels, like some properties will be able to do more for the environment and some will be able to do more for the community. It just depends so much on like their specific ethos. Yeah, there's no one size fits all. It's quite complicated to research, and that's why we try and just try and highlight properties and why we think they're really good. And that could be, again, it could be a chain, it could be doing something amazing, or it could be like a little independent that's run by husband and wife and only has 5 rooms.
Yeah, I think we need a guide to show us the values of every business. Now, Jenyas, obviously everyone loves to talk about trends, identify trends. It's always a big theme, isn't it? So would you be kind enough to tell us about trends from a guest perspective, but what we're always also really interested in is about how employee demands are changing and expectations internally are changing.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, I think what's happened over this past year has been really quite amazing because COVID has almost been like the great leveler. You know, different things happen at different times and industries get affected different ways. But of course, COVID really hit everyone in this really unexpected way that no matter what kind of business you were, and especially with hospitality, all of us were sort of hit the same way because of travel restrictions, et cetera, et cetera. And then I think what ended up happening, and I had this discussion with somebody else, is that, you know, the pandemic gave your culture nowhere to hide because it was what it was, you know.
Your company culture.
Sorry, your employee culture and your hotel culture, you know, and your guest culture, quite frankly, because, you know, for years and years, companies love saying, you know, this is who we are. We're amazing at this. This is what we do well. This is what we are. These are our values, et cetera, et cetera. And then something like this happens. And that's really when your vision and your values and your mission and all those good things get tested. What's happened, you know, as you kindly said, you know, we were very fortunate. We made a commitment, you know, in the very first week when we decided to close our hotels. We went into lockdown. We said to our employees, we're not going to make any redundancies. We're going to keep you all on staff and we're going to continue to pay you. And a year on, we haven't changed from that commitment. But what's fascinating when you talk about trends is that, it used to be pay was important and benefits and all that kind of stuff. Definitely job security is now the top of the list. If you look out there because of what's happened, and that's, very much changed the way people think. And when people think of job security, then it really becomes about, mental health and well-being. Knowing that, this pandemic has given us insight. I joked at the beginning, welcome into my living room, but, we've been in contact continually with our people, and we have seen inside their homes. And not everyone gets to live in a home. Like, I have conversations with people that share a flat with 4 other people and things like that. And it really gives you a different perspective. What are you going to now do with this information? What are you now going to, how have you adapted your culture through communication, mental health, well-being, and then make sure that becomes a proper part of your culture moving forward. It doesn't get forgotten when things open up and travel begins again. And I think these are the types of things that we have to be really conscious of, because they're not a trend, they're just the reality now.
I think you're right. When people talk about sustainability as a trend, I say, no, it's just about doing the right thing.
Exactly. Yeah, I've never been a fan of that. That's one of the words that I don't like, is trends. But
it's hard. I'm thinking of, obviously I talked before about the Greek word for hospitality is philoxenia, which means the kindness of strangers, which reminds us that the hospitality industry in particular is about people. It's not just about the real estate.
Absolutely.
It's about the human beings within it. And I think, hearing you talk about that really brings that to life. In terms of travel businesses, whether we're talking about a small independent hotel or any of them, we hear people talk about purpose-led hotels and purpose-led businesses. From any of you, how do you feel that, how does a business really show that it's purpose-led? I mean, obviously they're in it to make money as a business and its profit, but how do they really demonstrate that they're a purpose-led business? Who would like to answer that one?
I'll take it.
And I'll follow Teng.
Great.
In my life, in my career, I know I have to run a business to generate a return on investment for the capital. I know that, because that's what attracts the capital in the first place, and that's what keeps attracting the capital going forward. In business, I know I got to take care of the customers, because if they're not happy, they won't return, they won't tell other people. Those are givens. But what gives me the greatest joy personally is creating and sustaining employment. Because I know 95% of the world population, employment is what gives them the opportunity to live the life that they want to live with their families, right? Because that's our means. And I don't just mean any employment, but meaningful, high value add employment, so that they can indeed do something extra with their family, not just getting by. And that's always been my joy, my personal joy. Now, if I take that to investors, it's not going to get very excited about it. So I know I have to speak to my audience according to their listening. But deep down and in the right audience, I'll talk about the joy of creating and sustaining employment, because that's about the people. That, yes, I impact my customers' lives, but I impact much more greatly the lives of our employees.
Thank you. I think that's a really powerful and important comment, actually. And I think there's that, tension between, labor and capital, and you've really shown us that. And obviously, Jenyas, I'm sure that you would love to comment on that.
Yeah, I mean, Ted speaking my language. We are not giving people jobs. We're giving people a reason to get married and go on holiday, pay their rent, eat, and wonderful life. And I think if you have to be driven by that, that has to be your purpose. And if it's not your purpose, then I would question why you're doing it in the first place. But the idea of having purpose then is wanting to be involved in the actual business, wanting to understand that you're so much more than the job that you have taken. One of the things I continually say is that we hire somebody and we put them in a box, right, in the organizational chart, and then we spend the whole rest of our careers trying to get them outside that box. Opposed to really bringing them in, understanding that this is their purpose, what we want to achieve in our vision, and how we want to allow it to have voice. I think the biggest mistake employers make is not letting their people what's on their mind, but also what's important to them. What's important in connecting with the community, what's important to them on diversity, what's important to them on sustainability, et cetera, et cetera. That's going to then continue to grow their passion for the company, but also the purpose in the first place. Yeah.
Great, thank you. We're inviting questions, of course, to you from the audience, but I will just comment, we are talking about people, but of course it is about the places and it is about destinations as well. How do we preserve and promote destinations at the same time? I will ask you, actually, Ted, if you're happy to answer that, and then I'm going to hand you a crystal ball, Serena. I'd love you just to predict how you think travel is going to look in the next few years after that. So, so Ted, how do we preserve and promote a destination?
Well, I think the pandemic is a blessing, if you can call it a blessing. If the businesses took the opportunity to hit the reset button, right, just to step back and rethink it, because the past 10 years, it's just been a go, 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 and no one thought, slowed down and thought about their business as to where they're going. I think the pandemic caused us to rethink what is best for our long-term success, right? We weren't expecting it, we didn't ask for it, but it came, right? So looking back, we were somewhat on a downward spiral of more volume and lower prices as an industry. I don't mean all the segments. And quite frankly, it is just simply not sustainable. If you look at Venice, it's not a great experience when you are shoulder to shoulder with everybody else. And when we see pictures of oxygen tanks left behind on Mount Everest, these are not sustainable pace that we were on. And we have to sort of think better and not just more. And we have to think quality of the experience over quantity. And we have to rethink this volume times price formula. It's equals revenue, right? To me, maybe less volume, more price, and a better value proposition at the end. So to answer the question, preserve the destination, promote the value. Right? It may mean adjusting it so that you have to charge more and have fewer people, but in the long run, we will all be more successful. And perhaps those who are not able to come to a certain destination will develop other destinations that becomes more sustainable rather than everybody wanting the same experience.
Thank you. I mean, I completely agree. It's the long term. That's the big thing, is always thinking about what we're doing now. How is that going to affect things in the long term? There's too much of a culture of short term gain. So Serena, I asked you the unaskable question. What lies ahead? Feel free. We've had lots of questions come in. So yeah, please tell me what you think.
Okay, I'll try and answer it very briefly. I think one of the most important things that COVID's taught us also is not to take travel for granted. And I think so many of us just thought that we could travel whenever we wanted, wherever we wanted, but not very much money, and that really impacted the environment in a very negative way. So I think the mindset of travel being a luxury again is a really good one. So I think there'll be so many shifts, but I think that the focus will be a little bit more on why people are traveling somewhere rather than just trying to tick it off a bucket list. Why personally, what do they want to get out of the trip? And they'll be thinking a little bit more differently. And we'll see a lot more variety in terms of where people are traveling to. I think also the first trips that we'll be seeing people go on in the next year or so will be these kind of nostalgic trips. People haven't been able to travel for so long. They want to make sure that those first trips they go on are worth their money and worth their time. They just want to be reunited with their family and friends and maybe go back to somewhere that they loved from their childhood. So it won't necessarily be something very out of the box and different. But then after that, we'll be seeing, like Ted said, less frequent trips, but bigger ones that people spend longer on, these once in a lifetime trips. And people have had a lot of time to think about that now, whether that's going to Bhutan or Philippines or whatever it was, and just taking the time out of their work to do that really well and research that properly.
Great.
Yeah, I think it's about deeper, not about check the box, been there, done that, but really engage into the culture for that experience.
Yeah, I think on social media, it's not seen as, it was seen as almost distasteful this past year to really go somewhere and be Instagramming every single thing, like the influencers who went to Dubai over the holidays really got an earful. And so I think people will be traveling for slightly different reasons because they're not going to be wanting to show it off in such a flashy way. It's more for traveling for personal reasons and to have that amazing experience.
I think that's a really good point. And, exactly as Ted says, it's not about the superficiality in the show. It's much more, I think in the last year, we've learned to journey inwards a little bit.
Yeah.
I hope it won't go back to how it was. A great question that I want to hear the answer of. Eugenio, how do you see the perception and vision of luxury shifting post-pandemic?
Yeah, I'm happy that the vision of luxury is shifting a little bit because for years it's just had this certain reputation that it was only achievable by certain. And then, of course, over the years, especially in the last 5 to 7 years, it's been completely diluted, right? From luxury coffees to luxury hotels to, luxury cookies. It's
luxury
really
butter.
What's that?
You can get luxury butter in the supermarket.
Who knew? That's I'd like to try it. I'm not going to lie, but it is one of those things. So I'm very hopeful that I love what has been said by both Serena and Ted. Another phrase that I hate is heads on beds. Let's just fill it. Less is more. Better quality, better perception of what you're getting. And I think people are willing to, first of all, pay for that because they want to really connect with where they're going. And I think that's really what luxury is. It's all in the eye of the beholder. And, luxury should get to a point where it's just how it makes you feel. It's the experience that you're looking for. And sometimes that might be, checking into an organic farm and doing that, although that sounds like hell to me. Or, being on a beautiful beach, which is exactly like Serena's background. That's for me, right? So it's relative to the person, but I think that's what I think people need to think about with luxury in the future.
So one of the questions which we've also touched upon and a topic close to my own heart is about whether sustainability and luxury can coexist. And all I would chip in again is just thinking about impact, looking at how one product or process, whether it has a negative impact or a positive one. Serena, do you have any other thoughts on that sort of idea of, because typically people think you can't have something truly sustainable, which is also luxurious.
I'd almost say that it's the opposite, that you'd have sustainability and luxury could almost coexist better when you've got more money in to play with than having sustainability and mass tourism. I feel like you'll be so much better to answer this question than me. I feel like you should answer this question. This is your expertise. But
thank you. I'm going to take what you just said and plagiarize that in future, because that sounds like a great way of expressing it, because I'm constantly battling with people about that. They also feel that just travel can't be sustainable. But I think when you look at the power of travel in whatever context to have a social impact, whether it's internally, externally, it's incredible.
Well, even I think conservation is a really good example of needing tourism to create sustainability. We look at gorillas in Rwanda, for example. Like, people need to go and visit them and pay a really high price for that visa every day. I think it's like £1,500. in order to fund the program around it. And if that goes away, then in the past year, they've had problems with poachers, for example.
Absolutely. I mean, there's even more than that. There are many destinations, built around having this luxury tourism, which works hand in hand with conservation. As someone said to me the other day, if you didn't have the luxury eco lodges, many of them, huge swathes of forest would be prone to deforestation. But because they have that revenue coming in, they're able to preserve all that land around them. And so it's an incredible part. And as we know, in the last year, we've lost a lot of revenue in the luxury sector, which was vital in terms of protecting biodiversity, whether it's in Africa or everywhere. So it's really interesting. I'm sorry we don't have Tony here because I would be curious to know how the sort of asset management portfolios and these investors are really looking at how, when they acquire all these properties, how they're also investing in these incredible initiatives. But I will ask, obviously there's been a big trend towards staycations and domestic travel because that's all we've got. Ted, do you think that trend's here to stay?
I think some of it will. I think based on what I've seen in the past, we adapt when we have to, and then when we no longer have to, we will go back to what we truly enjoy. So I think for some people, staycation, pleasure, whatever it may be, but I think people will choose the experiences that truly they truly enjoy, and I am of the opinion that our industry will return more to the 2019 level than not, significantly more, 80, 90% back to that behavior than really the pandemic have caused some permanent change. I do think the corporate travel has been permanently injured because of the technology demonstrated. When we have to use Zoom, we found how productive it can be, particularly for internal meetings. I think external travel and also luxury, because luxury is usually the corporate travel is the face-to-face meetings that's critical, not just internal meetings that can be conducted over Zoom. So I think the external client-facing travels will still continue back to the 2019 pace, but internal, meetings will probably be significantly reduced.
That's, totally plausible. I often get asked to try and predict or say what I think the future holds, but I really generally tend to say what I want to manifest. So if I were to say to all of you, the students, how can they help affect positive change moving forward? What do you think? Have we changed course, and how can we move us all in a better direction for planet, for people, in terms of sustainability? So, Serena, why don't you answer that first?
Oh, that's such a hard question. I suppose for students, when you're applying to the companies that you want to work for, you can have a look at really a little bit more deeply at their purpose and how they treat their teams, as well as local programs, and really just apply to businesses or companies that you really believe in the purpose of. And that will also then drive other businesses to then try and copy them. And then I'd say also when you are eventually working somewhere, to not be afraid to speak up or to give ideas on little things that the company could do to affect little changes that will eventually add up to become something much more impactful.
I think that's great advice. Really, really good advice. The more we all talk about it, the more we're all aware, the more we all care. Jenya, what would your advice be to the students?
Yeah, I'm forever the optimist. So definitely, I agree with what Serena said, doing your homework and understanding it. Do I believe that the world has changed as a result? Yes, in a good way. I think it has opened our eyes up. When you think about domestic travel, I think it has opened people's eyes to what's around them, and where they can go in their own countries. And I think that's a good thing. And I think, depending on situations, especially because families want to be together and things like that, and it's not necessarily easy to travel in larger groups. I think hopefully this will open their eyes, and it'll manifest into something positive for the future. I'm definitely believe there's a huge pent-up demand. I agree with Ted. I think we're going to go back to 80, 90, maybe higher, back to the way it was, and I look forward to that from the perspective of our industry, because we need travel to happen. But I do believe it's opened people's eyes to doing it in a different way, and that's a good thing. And I would urge the students, as the next generation and future travelers, to push for that. Ask the questions, and when you're looking at your travel and where you want to go, set your bar higher. With regards to sustainability, accountability, conservation, all of those right things to ask and do, no matter where you're going, a city center or a remote area.
Wonderful. So obviously I'd love Ted to contribute. We've got a few minutes left. If there are any more questions from the audience, please send them in. We'd love to hear. These are wise words and wise people. So send last questions. Thanks, Ted.
So one pretense that the pandemic confronted was the issue of labor versus capital. You mentioned that earlier. Now, many hotel companies have said, our people are our most valuable asset. Well, it turns out not to be true. When faced with the pandemic, the capital owners rushed to protect their capital by laying off people, with a notable exception. Jenyas talked about it or mentioned it earlier in a very modest way, and let me amplify that. The Dorchester Collection as a company, it was just about a year ago that Francois Delahaye, their COO, I remember seeing an Instagram post that he said they will retain all the employees, pay them in full for the duration of the pandemic, all full the duration. That's heroic. That's leadership. The sad part is not many companies follow. Now, yes, this is kind, this is generous, but this is also very much aligned with their business strategy, right? They know part of the value proposition of Dorchester Collection is familiarity. Their employees know their guests, right? The employees are grateful for having their jobs during the pandemic, right? For not being laid off. And grateful employees take better care of their guests. So to me, that was a great example of what to do, but unfortunately, not too many people follow. Now, I don't have a problem with capital being the most important asset. But if that's the case, stop saying people are if you don't mean it, right? Labor, I think, coming out of this is going to rethink these promises. Labor, when I say labor, I mean all line employees all the way through CEOs. Labor is going to demand to be compensated now, not just hope for the future. Or labor labor will choose which employer based on what they have demonstrated in the past.
Yeah.
Right? To me, this was an opportunity for capital owners to show how important people are, and they missed it. Now, what if owners looked at their P&Ls on a 5-year or 10-year basis instead of quarterly or annually?
Long term.
Right?
Yeah.
We had 10 good years in the industry prior to the pandemic, right? Where did that money go? I think people in the industry was hurt the most during the pandemic. Yeah. And I also think recovery will be slow for many of them, as hotels have done away with many services during the pandemic, and not all of them will return. Mm-hmm. I think the owner is going to focus on recovering some of the profits lost before they put back some of that hospitality. So my advice to the students, run a business that's sustainable for the long term, run it for the benefit of all the stakeholders, investors, guests, employees, and suppliers. And yes, you can. You can do it for all.
Stakeholders.
Well said.
Stakeholders, not just the shareholders, all stakeholders.
Absolutely. And run the business with a sense of hospitality, not just the operating margins. And finally, run it in a way that you would be proud to tell your family, what did you do today? Okay.
So thank you so much. I'm sorry, we've almost run out of time. There was a question for me, and I will just say thank you so much to my panelists. I hope there's some hope and inspiration. My question was, how has journalism evolved to highlight advancements in sustainability? I won't go into it too much. All I will say is journalism serves a purpose to share stories and to share accurate information in a way I hope that pulls people into important conversations, and I hope that's what we've done today. So everybody, in a way, is a journalist. Think like a journalist. Share stories that really communicate things that matter with one another. Genuinely, thank you. What a wonderful panel and discussion. And, you know, globalism, localism, all of these things. Thank you. What a privilege to work in this industry.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for having us.
Thank you.
Great, Juliet.
All right, thank you to each and every one of our wonderful panelists for this great discussion. This panel was really great fun, and I think I speak for a lot of audience members when I say that it inspired a lot of inspiration and also excitement for entering, all of us young people were entering the culture of the luxury hospitality industry, and it really made it, I think it made all of us very excited for that. So thank you so much. Sandy, do you have any highlights?
I have to say that I was really inspired, especially when you guys all mentioned that it's important for the long-term vision, you know, no more like just to see till the end of the year, but it's important to see what it will be in the next 5 years or next 10. And also when Mr. Teng mentioned about the price times volume quantity, I thought that was very interesting and quite cool to see that, you know, maybe we should just higher the prices, have lower quantity, because at the end of the day, you know, with COVID, not everybody's going to go to somewhere crowded. So really, thank you so much for that wonderful panel. I had a great time. And Kate, what did you learn today?
I really was inspired by the sense of purpose that we got about the entire industry. I really thought that the discussion about finding joy and purpose and creating meaningful employment was very important for this generation of young leaders to hear, because a lot of us enter hospitality because we love people and we usually think about the customers, but that all starts with the employees, and that's where a lot of social good can be created. So thank you so much for all of these lovely insights. We hope you have a wonderful rest of your morning, afternoon, or evening.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
Have a great day.
Goodbye.
Bye.
All right, everyone. Well, that was such fun. I really enjoyed that panel. So to our YHS student delegates, your next session will start in just a few minutes, so go find that on your agenda. And to all of our attendees watching YHS, come back at 3:10 to 5 for a fireside chat style keynote. Don't miss it, and see you soon.